She would have told you she bought and sold your. So, hi. My reason for having this particular broadcast is kind of stated in the title, but thought I'd go over it, being as things have been a little rough, not only around the edges, but right in the gut. Shit, what date is it today? Oh, almost a whole month I've been away and drunk. Anyway, my brother, Jason, Fahl, died on January 13th, my mother's birthday, of a COVID infection. About one in, as I figure it, 1 in 400. And odds, meaning if somebody catches COVID, the odds in his condition, I believe, were 1 in about 400. That being based on the idea of unvaccinated people compared to vaccinated people, under 1% of the population catches COVID and is hospitalized and dies, right? Obviously, that's below 1% of the population right there. But apparently, the 17 or 22% less likelihood to die if you're vaccinated is still below 1%. So it's something like, let's say, one or not zero, like 0.004 of a percent. And if you multiplied that by maybe 17 to 22, and so I guess they're saying it's about 20 times. So 20 times 0.004 is another 0.08 ish. Did I get that right? Doesn't matter. Point is, brother's dead, and he was in the hospital. I was down south. I actually had gotten sick around the same time. His wife, who's an RN who works with COVID patients now, was a wound doctor. She treated him at home for about 10 days. He wasn't wanting to go into the hospital, so he missed the period of time that he, I guess, that they could have given drugs, like the first 5-day window, or they could have given him like monoclonal antibodies or thrown some treatment at him. But apparently, doctors are less willing after like a 3 to 5 day period of having the infection to treat the infection, I suppose. And my brother was pretty pig-headed about getting vaccinated, as was I, for what I believe is still good reason. Although I've had to capitulate on my position. By the way, here's to my brother who died, Jason. He was a drinker until about a year and a few months ago. He had quit for a whole year drinking. But as far as I can tell, our family are genetically okay, pounding the beer. Cheers. So anyway, I've been up in Seattle. Old girlfriend came down, picked me up. She went to the funeral with me, and yeah, it was very difficult. And it was open casket. My sister-in-law she and I had butted heads through my brother over the years, so things feel conciliatory. And anyway, I was kind of hoping actually to be able to open up my screen share so I could show you guys images of my brother, but I have some photos. So I'll show you those, even though he is on my, yeah, maybe he's on some YouTube videos, but for the most part, I think he's on just the Mad World of Mike Fahl documentary. Younger brother. Anyway, so I was down south. I was driving into Samerson through El Paso. I kind of knew my brother was sick. I think it was around Christmas, but I was taking a road trip. I was going to try to get to Austin, but first I had to get to Samerson, Texas, because that's where my dad's infant brother had died. Older infant brother by about 13 years. I guess it's Joe. And my dad's never been in Samerson. So anyway, we went to I was on my way to go to Samerson and find his grave. But I knew my brother was sick, and I talked to him. The last thing he said was, "Man, I don't want to talk." Like he was just put out, and he said the same thing to my dad and my other brother. And anyway, and then I just got clarification today from my sister-in-law that initially she brought him in to get chest X-rays, and when she came back, she said this is the worst case of what we don't want to see in a COVID patient. I think I just said that verbatim too. In terms of the lungs, and she called it pneumonia, COVID pneumonia, saying that. I thought that meant water on the lungs, liquid, and it just meant that the lung tissue had, I guess, crystallized. And the only way I conceive of that is when I think about people smoking menthols, or not even menthols, the other harder leaf. It's not important anyway. But it's also had something to do with the tissue falling back upon itself and stopping oxygen uptake in it, and so they were calling it a COVID pneumonia. And anyway, so she brought him back from X-rays saying that, and that she was we were kind of talking like, well, it'll be about 3 weeks, of him on oxygen at home before he's expected to get better. But then he ended up going in. She ended up having to call an ambulance because he wasn't getting up. And then I never made it to Samerson. I was going to go to Austin. I was going to cut up through Arkansas. Decide where I was going from then. But I never made it to Samerson after El Paso, so I just turned around, and then I had that conversation with her somewhere in New Mexico, Arizona, coming back, and I kind of put me at ease. I thought my brother was going to make it, and so I wasn't just pedal to the metal, floor him back, and there was nothing to do even if I did do that because he was in the hospital, and yeah. Like not just any Joe in the family gets to go barging into a COVID hospital and demand to see their sibling on intubated. But anyway, when she called the ambulance, they came, they got him, they brought him in. His oxygen levels were low. They put him on, they intubated him, which is exactly what I told her in the first conversation. Like, the reason he doesn't want to go to the hospital is because the intubation is a death sentence, right? And Anyway, point being is he I guess his heart rate got at a pretty high tick, like about 130 for a few hours. And I just asked her if he was unconscious during all this, and she said, yeah, he was unconscious. But after because they had to give him some drug, I forget the name. She typed it to me. I'll try to pull it up, like propertol, in order to stick the tube in the throat. And so anyway, let me see what she says here. She says in my question, she's so also my gallery owner killed himself last night. The guy that's been running my artwork here in the last two shows, so young guy. So that's hitting me weird. She writes back, no, Jason was not awake when he died. He was on propofol, a sedation drug used to make intubation possible. And mind you, she's a nurse that works with COVID patients, and she was a IC or a wound nurse before then. She's been at it for a few years. I watched her go through nursing school and so forth over the years. His heart had been beating at a rate of over 150 beats per minute for several hours with low blood oxygen, below 80% level, which caused his heart to stop. For 33 minutes, the ER staff did CPR and started drips that can make the heart muscle contract. However, Jason's heart wasn't able to beat, considering the very low blood oxygen. Also, he never was conscious following the intubation. I was with him the entire time, and I am sure that everything that could be done was even, though the end result is absolutely devastating. Anyway, yeah, so I kind of thought he was going to be on oxygen, because I was asking her. I said, well, of the COVID patients that you have, how many of them get out, right? And well, it wasn't how many of them get out. I didn't ask her that. I said, how long are the ones that get out on average in there? And she says 2 to 3 weeks. So, and then we got to talking about his oxygen status. And that's when I, even though I turned around, I was kind of heading back slowly. I drove all the way back through Phoenix, headed up, kind of not Lake Havasu, but around the California side. It seemed like it was longer. And then I'm driving up into Utah, into St. George, one of the lowest cities in southern Utah. And I just get a call from my mom saying, he's dead. So, anyway, yeah, it's been a wrangle because I sat there and I thought about my capitulation of my doubt on getting the vaccine, that margin of death would first hit so close to home. But when it did, and there's his body, I went out the next day and well, I got the Moderna vax, but it felt like I was going through like a religious conversion to convince myself that that was the best thing to do, considering that I was also in Lake Havasu on the way down, and I was sick for about 3 days, and a friend of mine showed up and gave me a couple ivermectin, and I took those immediately on the second day, and then by the end of the third day, I was up and at 'em. And so even when I got the Moderna shot, then the pharmacist was asking if I was sick, but I was kind of intentionally being vague. And she says, well, if you were sick with COVID and I give you this shot, you should be sick again with symptoms for, within the next 48 hours for about a day or so. And which happened. Anyway, and so So I got out of that before I even headed to New Mexico and into Texas, and then when I got back, a couple of people were like, "No, don't get the vaccine. Just get an antibody test," right? Which seems to be what's bearing out right now. But both my parents, they're still alive, and they're, and my sister-in-law, she's all vaccinated, and so's their daughter. And anyway, moral of the story is that he and I were on the anti-vax side. I was like, no, if a company doesn't have legal liability and the tests weren't done longer than a human gestation period, then you can count me out until I hear definitive, like, I guess it was pinned on mostly blood clotting. And a friend of mine took the Pfizer and he had a stroke, which is, as you know, blood clot oriented. And he's a statistician, and he says, "Well, I only partially weighed it on that, and the other part is on my on the fact that I have had a high blood pressure for years." In any case, but he knew that I was collecting negative data sets and base anecdotes and holding certain specific lines of thinking, as opposed to the idea that I would know anyone personally and then know them as close as my brother. There he is, right there, with his pooch, and good guy, tough guy. Um, I barged in. I wasn't like I said. My sister-in-law and I, we had we ruffled our feathers with my brother over the years. Like, she didn't want him to hang out with me, thought I was a bad influence. He would call her the buzzsaw, like, oh, gotta go into the buzzsaw. She's gonna try to dominate. Very, very pig-headed on her thing. Anyway, um, so I essentially ate crow on this, and at the same time, um, I've since shown not my sister-in-law, but my folks that were really pressuring me to get vaccinated, in the face of my brother's body, laying out before us, and and I thought, okay, yeah, she's barking this, it's on the radar. So I spent probably close to 20 straight hours of listening to, like, the anti-vaxxers very closely. So this McCullough guy, he says on a just one very short clip, but a couple people also noted this. I guess the Mahoney guy, he's vaccinated, but the McCullough guy isn't. But he says, boy, he's on this interview with that JP, the redheaded comedian fella, Rising with JP, and a couple other guys. And anyway, it's like a 3-hour panel, but I was listening to the whole thing because I was really, really wanting to figure out, like, how much that sub 1% margin was super duper important in terms of these tales. And my sister-in-law did say, okay, I'm going back to the non-vax COVID patients. She'd say that for over a year. But I was, like I said, I had my reasons for holding out, which was weird because my pain doctor thought that it was, like, strictly political. He's like, this isn't political. You don't have a vaccine. You're naked to that. You're naked to it. Anyway, so, but anyway, I capitulated. I got my first dose. And then the next day, Sweden and Denmark outlaw Moderna until they get feedback on well, not outlaw it, but they don't allow it for 16 to 32-year-old boys or people until they get the Moderna feedback on the blood clot issue. And then other people are now arguing that no, it's COVID itself that is the blood clot issue. And I just heard that today. In any case, so yeah, I spent a week and a half in Seattle with an ex-girlfriend at her house. Very cozy, meditating, drawing. Ship back a bunch of drawings I don't have with me, and was rather in a space of deferring my mind away from thinking about him. But he just keeps coming up because, as you guys know, death is pretty damn permanent. Okay, so what should I show you guys next? Yeah. Yeah, as a follow up, I now am using a 1/3 to 2/3 hydrogen peroxide nasal snort once a day. More than likely when I wake up. And then every few days I'll do an iodine nasal rinse. Probably until I get the second vaccine. Even though it makes me wonder what I'm doing. But so, thank you. There's my brother's urn that I drew. Everyone got a little urn. And, well, his brothers, his parents, and his 2 stepsons and daughter. And there's the second sketch I did for him. Just up top, it just says, "Bye, everyone. Glad to have met you." And at the bottom, it was fun while it lasted, but I was also gonna write, "Bye forever, Mike." Personalize it to me. Good knowing you would have been more appropriate. This is what I'm going to do for you guys while I take a small pee break. Before I get right back, I'm going to let you guys listen to this in a speed up era, and I'll be back. 30 seconds. Thanks for listening. So anyway, yeah, just the follow up is he did. He got cremated. Lots of crazy. Meaning that my sister-in-law, unbeknownst to me, decided to have his funeral at a Mormon church or his service. Which at first I was like, well, we're not Mormon, and I know that you guys aren't closet Mormons, but anyway, and I wasn't really bent on it as much as she thought I was bent on it. But so we went in. My brother had a great eulogy to read. 4 of us got up. Like I said, I wasn't on the list to get up. I just happened to grab a bunch of envelopes that I had written a bunch of notes on. Right now, I'm looking for a copy of my brother's eulogy so that I can read it to you guys for myself. for anyone else who would like to listen, because I've been mulling over all sorts of things about him since he's been gone. Some of them having to do with martial arts and Cobra Kai and Aikido and Goju Kai and his anger and his um, resolute kick some ass approach to things, which is what my how I barged into the eulogy and said, when I was over at his house and his daughter was 10, he picked her up and held her against the wall. Yeah, we are Klingon, right? And he'd call me Jeeves. We'd go on the run from DC Cab. The late night cabbies would get together and go on a run, and my brother's job was to do night shift driving to pick up fish up in Rock Springs, Idaho, and bring them back to Park City and Salt Lake. And so, anyway, from DC Cab, we called it going on the run. Anyway, everyone's checked out now. Point is, I had a good eulogy, but my brother his took the cake, so I'm gonna go ahead and read this. I'm Doug, Jason's oldest brother. Despite being his brother, I didn't have as much time with Jake as many others had. In fact, I had a very difficult time recalling even a few specific memories to share. The very first memory I have of him was before he was even born. I remember my brother Mike and I sitting on the living room floor. Mike was 1.5 and I was about 4.5. My mom, sitting on the couch, said, I think I'd like to have a baby. Would you two like to have a little baby to play with? And we both squealed with excitement. Blur forward several months, and I remember approaching a crib in my parents' bedroom and looking down and seeing him for the first time. This tiny little baby, so sweet and innocent and small. Who'd have thunk he'd turn into a giant? I remember him being a sweet little boy growing up, but a lot of that's a blur. Jason's always had a great sense of humor. This started when he was young. I remember the first joke he told. What's the difference between a duck? That was it. He didn't have a punchline. Jason Jason and I looked a lot alike, both skinny, lanky brunettes with similar looking faces, but Mike was blonde, and Jason and I used to try to convince him that he was adopted. We knew it wasn't true. At least I don't think it was true, but the jury's still out. He and Mike played baseball, and Dad took us all to karate lessons. I remember ripping open presents on Christmas and family trips to Disney or visiting our cousins in Helper, Colorado, and Ohio. Jason had an encyclopedic memory of every movie ever made. He could recite any line from a movie as you were watching it. And he was always doing impressions as well. He loved irreverent comedies, action movies, sci-fi movies, Star Trek, you name it. Mm. As kids, our parents used to play cards every weekend with the Calder families. Richard and Carl were brothers, their wives Sandy and Judy, and the kids Chuck, Kim, Cindy, Stacy, Kenneth, and Scott would gather every week, and we were tight like the Brady Bunch. We made a little clubhouse under the porch stairs in the backyard, built amusement parks out of the cardboard boxes, used to walk into the closet to put on little shows, and played in the streets hiding from car headlights. The Seeger family lived across the street from us growing up. Dustin and Ty were the same ages as Mike and Jake, and they all hung out together and formed a pack and had many adventures. Like they built these elaborate bike ramps in the street to jump like their bikes off. But I was always a little removed from Jason growing up and also as adults, so I was struggling a bit on how to describe Jake properly. A few days ago, my partner, Scott, recalled his first impressions of Jason. He said he was super intimidating to meet, and he felt a bit uncomfortable, as I had previously warned him he would. But then he said he saw that Jake was super funny, irreverent, and a sweetheart deep down. They got along fine. He just described him as sheep in wolf's clothing. And that suddenly struck me as the perfect way to describe Jake. The real phrase was wolf in sheep's clothing indicates a clever wolf disguised himself to infiltrate an unsuspecting flock to attack them from the inside. That was not Jake. The opposite seems true. A sheep who adopts the persona of the lone wolf in order to protect and challenge his flock. The sheep isn't the right word. Sheep indicates a follower, blending in with the flock. Jake was never that. He went against the grain. He was an outsider and a rebel and a contrarian. So sheep isn't the right word, but lamb seems appropriate. A vulnerable, caring, helpful, thoughtful lamb is at the essence of his personality. So let's talk about the wolf. Jason started as a lamb, but when he hit puberty, he started to rebel a bit. He'd cuss up a storm and yell things at my folks and did what he wanted to do regardless, perhaps because he was the youngest child and wanted to be noticed, or maybe it was hormones. That wolf mask started to develop, and he made life a bit difficult for my mom and dad, and I was on the receiving end of that wolf as well. But he was young and just developing this aspect of his personality. He had a bark of a wolf. How many of you have been in public with Jake and suddenly you hear the most ferocious, rabid barking dog snarl and growling right behind you? That's true. My brother used to go, and he could imitate a dog barking. So he'd do that in public. It'd scare the heck out of you, scary enough to brown your whites, if you know what I mean. You'd turn around and it was just Jake making the sound, and he'd just laugh, and he'd look the part of a wolf. I'm 6'5", and he's a head taller than me and 240 pounds. He was a force, a giant, a gentle giant, and he had a mean-looking face sometimes, even when you was just relaxing. Sometimes he'd stare at you, and it looked like he wanted to murder you and say something. And you'd say something like, "What?" And he'd say, "Oh, nothing, just bored." He'd never try to hide his boredom, frustration, or impatience. You all know Jason was very direct, blunt, and unapologetic. He spoke his mind, and he'd call you out on your BS. If you held something back in a conversation due to politeness, he'd say, "Why don't you tell us how you really feel?" And he was hilarious and could often crack up everyone in the room. I remember he jumped off a roof once and broke both of his wrists and had to wear casts all the way up to his fingertips. I asked him how he was handling it. He said, "It's kind of fun. It's a good conversation starter, but the most difficult and challenging thing is I can't wipe my butt." So it was hilarious. However, sometimes his jokes felt like insults. He'd like to press people's buttons. If he knew what buttons to press, he would keep pressing them. His social interactions could often make you feel very uncomfortable. I can't count how many apologies I've had to make to waiters and waitresses over the years after Jake had his way with them. But if you knew him, you could see that it was all in good fun. You could see that this was just a role he was playing. He was a conundrum in a lot of ways. He would go against the grain in order to feel included. He confronted you better to better understand you. He offended you to show you he liked you. He mocked social norms to loosen you up and show you that you don't have to take life so seriously. He'd play the contrarian and show he agreed with you. He would press your buttons to get to know you and see how you'd respond under pressure. Sometimes his wolf persona got very dark. He could let it get out of control sometimes, especially if he was drinking. That's my pause point while I have a little drink. Not that Foster's was his beer of choice, but I don't think it was the Cobra Kai Coors Banquet either, but okay. Whoop. Sometimes he was worse. Okay, yeah, especially if he was drinking. He confided in me about some truly horrific events he experienced in his life that left some deep scars and really scarred him. And so I understood that this wolf persona was his armor, both to protect himself and also to protect his family and friends. But he knew how to defend himself. He had hands the size of pizzas. True. I mean, even in his casket, I'm busy putting my hand on his hand, and it's just humongous. And yeah, lot to say on that. Maybe on the other video. I don't know. See how long this one goes. But he knew how to defend himself. He had the hands the size of pizzas. He could put you in a headlock, knock you down, pick you up, flip you over with ease. Brock, his stepson, has some stories to share about Jake showing him some self-defense moves. If you ever ran into trouble, you'd be lucky to have Jake around. Let's talk about the lamb. Whatever chaos the wolf created around him, Jake was always observing and learning. He listened, even if he didn't agree with you. He devoted to loved ones, his flock. He loved his wife, Molly. On the wedding day, he was just beaming ear to ear, as I recall. He was nervous, skipped some of his vows, and went straight to "I do," and everyone laughed. I know Molly and Jake had some rocky times over the years, but just as many wonderful times as well. He stuck with her and she with him to the very end, and I'm so thankful and grateful that Molly was with him to the end. As difficult as that was for her, at least Jake wasn't alone. He loved and looked up to me and his brother Mike. He valued our advice and opinions, even if he often lost patience with us. He really would consider what we had to tell him. He took care of Brock and Brad and Aaliyah and Kristen and Brittany, and even though he made a lot of mistakes along the way, he always learned from them and tried his best to improve. He loved his mom and dad a lot. Um, Thanks, Steve Ernst. He loves his mom and dad a lot. He was so grateful for everything you've given him. He quit drinking more than a year ago, which I am so proud of him for doing. The last time I talked to him on the phone, he told me that whenever he felt like getting a drink, he emptied out his wallet into a box, and that kept him from buying a drink. He saved up to $1,200, and he gave it to my mom and dad. He told them they've always been there for him, and he wanted to start paying them back, and that was Jake. And Kayla is his crown jewel, his greatest achievement. He was so proud of her. I remember when I first met Kayla, we all met in a parking lot to go eat, and he jumped out of the car and tossed her into my arms like a sack of potatoes and said, "Here, meet your niece." He'd send me pictures and videos of Kayla almost every week to make sure I didn't miss her growing up. Jason used to take her fishing, teach her all the steps, and try to show her how to do it. He must have done a good job because she caught all the fish and he didn't. It was weird. Anyway, excuse me for a drink. Pause. Emotion break. In my brother's eulogy, boy, he pulled it off a lot better than I did. And boy, I lost my composure when I was up, but everyone else kept their shit. Kept their shit together. That is, the shit between your ears. So let's see. Anyway, so yeah, this eulogy really went off, and even people that were at the place were writing about my brother's eulogy to my brother, because he was pretty much a fucking headstrong Hulk of a badass, and but let me not sidestep on this one. The lamb persona was charitable. Jake discovered that the human Harmons was throwing out crates at perfectly good food every day. So he'd go, Harmon's is a grocery store. So he'd go steal it from out of their bins and distribute it to homeless people and his friends and neighbors, kind of like Robin Hood if Robin Hood started a food bank. Yeah, Jason and I would do that, or I'd follow him, or he'd assist me on what I did. But yeah, he'd do that. Um, when he drove his truck for work, he would always stop to help anyone having car trouble on the side of the road. He once discovered a deer. He actually found a couple deer, but he once discovered a deer caught up in a fence in the snow, and he stopped to set it free. He'd regularly take a picture of the sunrise and post it online and wish everyone a beautiful day. Jason brought people peace. He believed in hard work and bearing the burden for those who he loved, and he believed in continual improvement. Well, it's okay that you believed in it, man. When Jake stopped drinking last year, I could see a big difference. He started to unwrap himself from the wolf and started showing more of his lamb. He lost weight. He became more gentle, got off of his meds. Our phone conversations became more frequent and more meaningful than they had been in the past. And I thought we'd have many more years to get closer to each other. But I'm so glad that we had a few good talks recently. Um, but sheep in wolf's clothing can really only protect the flock from predators. Sorry, this has been like shit. Like, well, as you guys do know or don't yet know, but I haven't had a death this close. Shit, ever. So it's been waves of emotion and trying to adapt to his absence. So I'm happy that his family's kind of put together. So this is the kind of composure that I hold at a like, oh, Jordan Peterson can talk about being the strongest man at some guy's funeral, but I don't give a shit. I blubber. I don't care if I want to. Got off his meds. Phone conversations became more frequent, more meaningful than they had been in the past. And I thought we'd have many more years to get closer to each other, but I'm so glad that we had a few good talks recently. But a sheep in wolves can really only protect the flock from predators. A wolf is ill-equipped to protect against bad weather, pestilence, or disease. And Jake's Achilles heel was that he thought he was invincible. We all thought he was. But some forces are too big even for a giant. He left this world as he came into it, a pure, vulnerable, innocent lamb. Boom. So, okay, anyway, and then it goes on. I'd go even further and say he's a goat. Now, I don't mean the animal. Younger folks use the term GOAT as an acronym. It stands for greatest of all time. Jake always strived for greatness and may have felt he never achieved it, but he influenced the lives of every person in the room. He made us better people in his own unique and wonderful way. That is the greatest gift anyone could give or get. Coming up. Thanks for the patience. Woo. Beer break. No beer break. To the end of where my brother actually spoke. I encourage everyone to continue to learn from Jason. Carry his spirit with you as you continue his legacy. Be the lamb, be kind, observant, vulnerable, helpful, supportive, carefree, happy, but also be the wolf. Speak your mind, challenge the status quo, seek out your fortune and your destiny, find your wolf pack, and share the spoils with them. Protect each other, be bold and blunt and brave, and don't take life so damn seriously. And whenever you need to, go outside, howl at the moon. I know I'll be howling for years to come. Jason Scott Fahl. If only for today, you are the GOAT, the greatest of all time. I love you. You left us too soon, but you will always be here, and we'll never forget the force of nature you were. Love, your big brother. Well, so anyway, after this viewing in this Mormon church, and I was upset, seemingly like shit. We grew up around Mormons, separating from Mormons, and now in death he's surrounded by Mormons, and that's just a thing about growing up around major religion that you're not a part of, and where you have supernatural experiences like their founder, or not dissimilar. That's my little issue there. I'm going to continue reading two other people's statements that didn't get read that were sent to my older brother here in just a short minute. But yeah, God, the weight, just the weight of having a sibling short up dead in front of you is huge. And I actually, I mean, not everyone was touching his body, but several people were touching his body. And it was like grabbing his head and like wanting him, like, Jason, wake up. Like, come on, man, wake up. And like looking and watching, seeing how they sewed the mouth and the eyes together. I'll show you guys a photo. Why not? Right. Not that you guys should see it. Oh, wait. Okay, so here. That's my brother playing baseball. He was an all-star baseball player, right? On the 13th of January, 2002, our beloved Jason lost his battle with COVID-19 and took his last breath. He passed at Jordan Valley at the age of 49. With Molly on the side. Jason was born on December 16, 1972, to David Fahl and Faye Fahl. He attended Kearns High and Salt Lake Community College, and he spent 25 years working in logistics as a warehouse manager, most recently driving for Seattle Fish Company. That was a that was a little bit of the fucked up thing. Is now he drove and he delivered propane, but then several years ago I got him on a magazine cover for industry for doing propane, but then he moved over to the Seattle Fish Company. But Seattle Fish Company doesn't even deliver in Seattle. They pull all their fish out of the Gulf of Mexico, and they're run by Australian guys who happen to be at the funeral. And I'm busy there talking about DC Cab and the cabbies in the movie get together late night and they do a run and they wear masks. And Jason would call up and go, "Hey, Jeeves," because he'd call me Jeeves, call my dad Sparky. "Hey, Jeeves, you want to go on the run?" Or I'd ask him, "Go on the run." Anyway, let me finish doing this. So this was at the hangout, right? So why not, right? Why not read it? Why not record it? What's the problem? What's the problem with your head? Okay. Anyway, so where are we at here? So you guys get a piece of it, right? Jeff loved life and his family very much. He also was bringing laughter to any situation and lit up any room he entered. He was an avid gamer and also, I don't actually so much. Well, I don't mind this, right? But avid gamer and all. I don't remember being an avid gamer, right? And I don't remember really taking care of cars. He loved working on cars. Jason was kind and caring and often taking produce to neighbors in the homeless community and and spending time with his grandchildren on the weekend. Anyway, not to dox everyone. But, oh, so he, it was actually weird. My older brother lives in Seattle, right? We have the funeral, and I go up there with my ex-girlfriend from Seattle, who tells me don't calling her the ex-girlfriend. We're just friends. Whatever. Anyway, she's dropping me off over at my brother's place. And I get out. I didn't see my brother up there. He didn't even know I was up there. I just decided that he was driving up. She'd come down. I went back with her. Kind of mourn for a week, meditate. Anyway, I'm at his place. The mail woman shows up, hands me a box. And I go and knock on his door and say, hey, here's your mail. And it turns out she delivered my brother's ashes. So that's my little portion of my brother's ashes, right? And the idea of human remains, I was actually symbolically upset, and I have been for years with my folks because they want to get cremated. I didn't know my brother wanted to be cremated. I never heard that. I mean, I want to be, given a clown face and spun around naked on a spinning wheel out front of the temple when I die, but that's not going to happen, I'm guessing. But anyway, so burial or cremation, my brother, I guess, had cremation. I always had an issue with that, other than the biblical ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I generally prefer the idea of a calcified, fossilized bone, something or another that is emblematic of the carcass and buried. Besides that, I was also, even though I took photos, which I was going to show you guys, at least a couple. When I first went to Venice Beach in 1997, I picked up a hitchhiker outside of Vegas, and I was really distraught. I only had $70, and I knew I wanted to see the beach. And I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "Santa Monica." "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to Santa Monica." "I'm just going where you're going." And anyway, and when we landed, he set me up with a friend who was a Russian American guy that had photos of a bunch of guys, pallbearers, like a huge bunch of people walking down a trail, black and white photo, holding his dad's caskets. It was like a pallbearer photo, and then one that was inside. A picture of his dead dad in black and white, and it was just a noble funerary photo. And so anyway, while at the Mormon church, we were all there, and there's this little room where we'd see the body before everyone got up and went into this auditorium and spoke. And by the way, they handed out sack lunches, which, well, I'll just let you guys ponder on that one, which I couldn't be a part of. Shit, even today, I'm like at a random cemetery taking photos of all these deer that are eaten. And yeah, something my brother would do. And then I'm busy with this sketch. Like, glad we met, and bye everyone. And then scan drawn, his ashes. Let me just skip to this. Even though, yeah, I did go hang out with my niece and his wife, and it's a new communication level. It's a new composite of interaction and socializing. And oh, here's a cool photo from Seattle back after my week long drunkenness. Um, I shouldn't just say that. I mean, it was a sulk and a meditation and an emotional reappeal. But there's Mount Rainier. Should have got Rainier beer. And so anyway, after the whole Mormon thing was done, and I'd clashed with my sister-in-law about why it was at a Mormon church, but I didn't at that point give a shit. And anyway, it turns out that she said, "Hey, when everyone was wrapping up the services, she's like, "Hey, we're going downtown. We're going to reopen the casket, and we're going to have a cheers over them." And so we went and had a drink. And anyway, it was nice because even he had a good friend that he grew up with, Troy, that did a great eulogy. I barged in then, saying I've got words to speak, and went on my rant about his cultural impact and about him being Like he really. One of the last dinners I had with him, he and his family, his wife and his daughter, and they were all three wearing "They Live" shirts from the movie "They Live," and the shirt say, "I come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubble gum," right? And so it's a quote from that movie. And anyway, they're all three wearing that, and I'm mentioning this in my kind of barged in ramble about my brother enacting like the cultural influence prior to the internet and his love for campy B-rate movies, just like myself. Because um, shit, that's a sign for me to even get more distracted and take a huff here before I show dead. Sorry, make this the big Mort picture. Mort. The big Mort, not the little death. Oh, so get a load of this though. The problem is all these photos that we gathered to show got lost of them, which is the second big death when the memories of the person that die are gone as well. Instead of le petit Mort, you have the grand Mort. So that's me, my older brother, his guy, hanging out in Seattle, and so it's kind of going in time a little backwards. That's me and my older brother. He's an augmented actor. If you look up the term augmented actor, that's my older brother. He's on YouTube and Twitter and whatnot. And anyway, interesting photos. Okay, so I'm just meditating on design up in Seattle, trying to clear my head, trying to bubble through all these emotions, take photos, meditate, just take in the existential gut punch of it all. And good old Monica, boy, she walked me through. She's like my clown mirror. Um, 'Cause she's 50. Like, never mind. It's a joke. Okay, so I'm going to limit these photos a bit. That's me standing next to my brother with his stepson, that he raised, Brock, with his back to us. Dead meat, fried whale shit, if you will. His joke. Yeah, it'll be fried whale shit. So there's my mom. There's my older brother putting their hands on him. And that's about the only. I'll just kind of blow that up. But yeah, and then get a load of this for who is ever watching. Talk about an abuse. See, I was upset at the fact that I was even gonna take photos, because if it wasn't for that guy picked up in his Russian dad photo, I wouldn't have taken any photos, because it would have been better to ephemerally forget, or only ephemerally remember his body. But there were some peculiar activities and just some intimacies and discussions amongst the family. It was great to have. But yeah, maybe I should leave everything there. I think I just wanted to overemphasize the point that I had that my parents and my older brother and my brother's wife and daughter were all vaccinated, where my younger brother and I were not vaccinated. And he happened to, I guess, fall in what I like to say is a dartboard, or a jartboard, So if scoring doubles are all of the vaccinated people and the larger lion's share of the dartboard are unvaccinated people, apparently if there's a grand archer that is shooting into that population of people, it is still more likely to kill the unvaccinated over the vaccinated. And I capitulated and found the McCullough video 3 hours in with Waking to JP, where he said, just in a very short snip, he said, actually, when I hear that a patient has COVID, I ask them if they've been vaccinated. And when they say yes, I actually breathe a sigh of relief. And then JP or one of the other comedians says, yeah, if you overlook all the vaccine deaths, ha ha ha. And my opinion is that there's more people that have had the vaccination that aren't falling dead. I'm still upset of the lack of blood feedback, blood clot feedback, and the lack of disclosure. And I still think that the way in which the government shared its information and performed its authorial um, shrouding of the public was less than authentic and less than transparent, and hiding the background data or attempting to do so legally seemed like as close to politics as I was getting with regards to that. I was simply under the guise that, hey, if in doubt, hold out, right? If you're not vaccinated, if in doubt, hold out. But having my brother's body shored up in front of me, I was kind of like, and then having my sister-in-law argue, like, hey, because I was like, look, he's on his deathbed, right? This is when we're talking, when we're still speculating that he's going to get better in a few weeks. And she says, well, he really wished when he was in the ICU or that he got vaccinated. And then I watched these other doctors online and say, yeah, a lot of patients, when we're about ready to intubate them, say that they really kind of wish that they got vaccinated. And I was thinking, like, God, that just sounds like a forced confession or something. Like, hey, aren't you feeling bad that you got vaccinated? Anyway, so my sister-in-law was telling me that, and I said, look, this isn't a time about who's being right. Like, what can you do now? He's 10 days into this. This isn't an argument about who's right. If he's on his deathbed, like, the last thing the guy needs is to, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do it your way. In any case, I still use, I purchased ivermectin. It costs $250 from 7cells.com. Anyone want to pick up ivermectin? I believe I have antibodies because I believe the Moderna shot that I got, just like the pharmacist said, would get me sick for about within the next 24 hours, for about 24 hours, which happened. If I had already had antibodies in the system, the argument about whether or not someone getting vaccinated that already has antibodies is greater or worse efficacy than somebody that merely has antibodies or merely has the vaccine. That data I don't know. In any case, I don't uh, fault my sister-in-law for not trying to use, treatments in the face of the situation my brother was in. But the thought had occurred to me, and I don't believe she holds me responsible for having a retractive opinion, a holdout opinion that he, in his own mind, had already come to conclude, as so many people do. Note, quote unquote, right now is when the Canadian truckers' Ottawa revolt is. This is where a lot of the weird thing was, yeah, the day after I get the vaccine, and shortly after his cremation, um, like, oh, Switzerland and Denmark ban Moderna, and oh yeah, Boris Johnson's allowing the UK to open, and oh, the Supreme Court had kind of said no one has to take this mandate, and it was almost like my brother was this sacrifice in my mind. Like, God, what a rarity out of the blue of all the people I know that are not vaxxed, like shit gobs, and then all the people that I know that are vaxxed, shit gobs. None of them are dead, just my brother. And anyway, yeah, uh, it's for me, the attempt to find the sliver of the oppositional position instead of absolutizing the position was and is held in a sloshy statistical bag, and I find it still an absurd phenomena that we're all still living through, with all of its ancillary and secondary problems. And but that being said, it did feel like I was having a religious conversion to do it. I'm less likely to get the second shot, although I'm heavily weighted to do so. Even though it's odd, because my dad, who was pushing me in the face of my brother's death to get vaccinated ASAP, he's actually swayed closer to my brother's side now, but he says it doesn't really matter because I'm already this way. Anyway, so I'm going to end it there. Thanks for tuning in. I would say, oh yeah, good old Faith to Grace Ange in Canada decided to take the liberty of taking the time that my brother died in order to overreach into our family affairs for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I decided and let her know that that would be the end of my communication with her. And so she left an hour and a half groveling retractment, and I get it, but I don't get it. And I'm not trying to be an ass about that. I was actually going to keep that out of this video. Maybe put stuff about people's reactions and how the family dynamics regroup. Everyone around every death has a different situation. Like, my parents really upset that they lost one of their own children during their own lifetime. Me, familial death, and he was my friend. Like, he lived close to me, so he was also not just my brother; he was a close friend. And then his daughter, the dad loss. So the dynamics, all around, wives and stepsons and whatnot. It's just been heavy, and the idea of empathizing, like a great deal of the sadness has to do with imagining how other people are sad about it. And in any case, I decided, even though it just feels like it's an indicator of some huge change to come in my life and in a lot of people's lives, it also feels like it's just a huge weight and a heavier consideration on, like, more delicate approaches to life and death, and kind of accepting your mortality. I did spend a good meditation on mortality, and as many of you watching and know me have had your own experiences, well, yeah, across the board, folks. Appreciate y'all commenting in there, and yeah, I'm gonna I'll call it quits there. Um, God, I'm not certain what other links. Oh, I was going to read this. So let me read this. This is first from his stepson. Jason came into my life when I was nothing but a knucklehead. Laugh out loud. I must have been 15 years old. After my OG original gangster father folks split and divorced, I fancy myself the man of the house. Haha. Then here comes the big old lank named Jason. Jason. I'm thinking, yeah, right. Oh boy, did I go out of my way to get him gone. I'd stay out late, keep bad company, and his very favorite, I'd smoke the pot in my room until he thought the damn house was on fire. All this to make it clear that I disregarded his authority. Man, I'm so glad none of my stunts pushed him away because with time he truly earned my respect. Not only that, but an honest love for him. Jason enlightened me on so many things, cool music and movies, and even took me to go shoot rabbits a few times. Those were great times. Then he shared his love of judo, which was actually Aikido, with me in 2020. Hindsight. He had ulterior motives for these demonstrations. He'd say, "Come here, kid. You got to learn to defend yourself." He'd always begin with, "Okay, now hit me." Now, I'd do my best to get a shot in on him. I mean, I'd really try to hit this guy, but Jason was a big man and he would intercept me with ease. He'd twist up my ass in a wicked, unnatural knot, and while just cracking up at my efforts, I would just get frustrated no matter how hard I tried or how low my blows would start to get. He handled me with ease as of an expert. I learned a lot of those moves thanks to him, but I think he loved to show me my place, being the little punk I was. Now, as I said, looking back at it, those keto sparring sessions were Jake's way to exact his revenge on me for all the shit I had given him. Haha, classic J Man. He was there for my brother, and I like a real man would. He supported us. That's his, Brad. That's his brother. He led an example and made it clear real men work hard and get the things they want in life by earning them. Then he and my mom and Aaliyah, had continued to demonstrate love and respect for us all. A good father and husband together, Jason and my mom raised a phenomenal young woman. Kayla was loved and nurtured until all of a sudden she was graduating, earning high marks all the way through school. He was so proud of her. I know he was proud of all of us. Jason was always freaking funny, and he'd say things and do things just for the shock and awe factor. Oh, it drove mom crazy. All while it had me in hysterics. I gotta say, never mind. I'm not gonna say it, but there. Okay, I just will say it. So his mom was frustrated, my brother's wife, because she was getting all the funeral shit done, and Mormons have things called steakhouses. Well, steak, Jason used to love steak, and so his son-in-law said steak, like the meat, and I said Jake loves steak, and then his mom got upset because she was trying to explain that the funeral service wasn't at a Mormon steakhouse. Anyway, Christmas Eve, we all sat as a family and watched the 80s cult classic film They Live. Coincidentally, that was the very first film he made me suffer through when I was a teenager. I got through it back then, but this time I understood the message. Today, I get a kick out of referring friends to that movie, and I always will, just like I always know he'll live in all the lucky people his light and energy touch. Thank you, Jay. You'll be missed, Brock. And from Brittany, this will be the end of it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I only know Jason a couple of years, but from the first time we met, he welcomed me with open arms and immediately made me feel like family. His inappropriate humor made me feel at home. Any awkward silence I may have been feeling, he was sure to break and either put a smile on my face or made me scratch my head and wonder what was going on in your head. I love He was different from the rest, outspoken and not one bit afraid to give his opinion to anyone at any time. I feel like I was robbed of many things I could have learned from him. In my heart, I just keep hoping this is just an inappropriate joke and he's going to jump from behind a wall somewhere. And I was just messing with you. COVID can't take me. In reality, losing Jason opened my eyes to how real this really is and how important it is to say you all can to whom you care about. Say all you can to whom you care about before they're really gone. I love you, Jason. I miss you more than I knew was possible. Thank you for all you taught me. I promise to look after Mom and Kay. All right. Um, guess let's just have a close. He's in the center. Thanks. Thanks, guys.